Alrighty, so when I set up a camera, my goal is to put everything I need right in front of me and get rid of the stuff that I don't need. So in today's video, I'm hoping to walk you through how I set up my Lumix GX85, and maybe there will be some tips and tricks in here that are helpful. So let's start and talk about how I use this camera like 90 to 95% of the time, and that is in aperture priority mode, shooting raw, autofocus single with the 49 area autofocus mode. I shoot 4:3 format and I shoot in RAW. I also, let me see if I can pull it up here. I use the center weighted metering mode. I found that to be the best for the type of photography that I shoot with this camera. And I use the max stabilization. I found that to be pretty amazing. And I use the automatic shutter type. And there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. Oh, I think I just wanted to mention that I do often use this EV compensator. I didn't realize that this camera had one until I was trying to change the shutter speed very quickly and I kind of pressed too hard. But yeah, that's pretty much how I use the camera most of the time. There are some little tidbits in here that I wanted to make sure that I brought up. And so first, let's talk about some custom buttons. So this one is drive mode, and we'll change that to burst. And I'll show you why that's drive mode, because you can also access drive mode by hitting down on the D-pad here. But the reason I put it up there as well is because I do often use this exposure bracketing, but when you're in the burst drive mode, it just takes one photo. So I have that there to remind me to switch over to the single mode, and then you can do your brackets like that. But for the rest of the custom stuff, it's pretty much how the camera comes. Nothing too crazy there. So like this is going to be your ISO. This is going to be your autofocus mode. This is your drive mode. This is white balance, which I leave on auto. And then this brings up your Q menu. And so for the Q menu, I guess worth mentioning, I do use the auto shutter type. I don't think it's ever used the electronic shutter. I do use the full stabilization. I shoot in RAW. I think the photos are very editable, very push and pull. I use center weighted. I used to use multimetering, but I found center weighted to be a little bit more consistent, especially when you're looking at people. And then I use AF single, and that's mostly because this lens, the 20mm f1.7, does not support the AF continuous like the kit lens does. So I just leave it on AF single. That way it's a consistent focus mode between the two. I've never really messed with the silent mode, but I like to have it there on pretty much all of my cameras in the event that I do want to be silent. Peaking is for manual focus for me. Zebras is for video. I was messing around with these filter effects, but never really liked any of them. And then like I mentioned, I do shoot in the 4:3 aspect ratio. I kind of enjoy it, and it makes this camera feel special and different from the other ones. So that is it for kind of the quick and accessible stuff. You do have these like touchscreen function buttons, but I never really use them. So let's just go ahead and dive into these menus. On the photo side, I think there's only one thing that I wanted to share. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that for the ISO, I do set it to the maximum, 25,600. That's just because I prefer to have a photo that's noisy than not have a photo at all, especially with Photoshop's like denoise tool. I think it's pretty good. So that's just my personal preference for that. And then on the video side, I wanted to show you the record quality. So MP4, 4K, 30 frames per second, 100 megabytes per second. That's just my preferred. I like 30 frames per second a good bit, and that was the highest bit rate available. So that's what I do. And I do like the video quality on this camera. It's very solid, especially for the size. Let's see what else I wanted to show you. I do not use these custom set memories. I do use them for professional cameras like my Nikon and then previously the Sony a7 IV. I find them really helpful when you know, okay, I want C1 to be a minimum shutter speed of 500. I want C2 to be f2.8. I want C3 to be blah, blah, blah. That way when you're in these situations where you need to quickly switch between settings, but you don't want to mess with dials, they can be super helpful. But this camera is not really that for me. It's like a more slow and deliberate process. So I'm very fine kind of fiddling with dials and being a little bit more tactile. So no issues there. I know some people like to use back button autofocusing. I think that was especially popular in the DSLR days. Ever since I switched to mirrorless, I haven't really found any reason to use back button focusing. So I always couple it with the shutter button, and I haven't found any issues with that. What else? Oh, I do always turn off this AF assist lamp, and I'll show you why. So let me put this lens cap over it so it thinks it's dark. So the AF assist lamp, you'll be able to see like right above the camera, that little red. I always find it, one, super distracting, but also like it brings a lot of attention to myself. And I do not like that, especially when I'm in a situation that's, you know, a low light photography kind of, yeah, it's just easier for me to not have it on. And I've never really felt like I wasn't able to acquire focus because I, you know, turned this off or whatever. So I think it's a personal preference, but yeah, I always leave it off on pretty much every camera. And then this one, focus release priority, I always prioritize release. I would rather have a photo that's a little bit blurry than not have a photo at all. And so that's always kind of been my idea behind choosing that setting. And then manual focus assist, I did think that this is worth showing. So let me pop into here, change this to manual focus, and then you'll be able to see what it looks like with my focus peaking. So it's set to high and the color is green. So you can see there that it starts to show up. And we start to get some little focus peaks. And then I think if I hit back, yeah, you can see how it looks like for the full screen. So yeah, I find it helpful for me whenever I use I have a TT Artisans 35mm that I use sometimes. And yeah, as long as I'm not wide open with that lens, it's pretty easy to acquire focus. So that's super helpful. And then let's see if there's anything else over here. I never turn on the auto review. Like when you take a photo, it immediately shows you the photo that you just took. I just prefer not to do that. It kind of takes me out of the flow of taking photos. So that's something that I also do on pretty much all of my cameras. This video button I think is cool and helpful. So like for me, if I'm in a hybrid situation where I want to be able to quickly shoot video and photos, I'll put it in shutter priority mode. That way I can control the shutter speed for whatever photos I'm taking, let it select the other, like the aperture and the ISO. And then if I want to take a video, I just bring it back down to twice the frame rate. So in my case, it would be 60, and then I hit this record button, and then I'm taking videos. So I found that to be pretty good. Let's see. What else? I don't think there's anything else for the custom buttons. There is a way to, I do leave the live view mode on 60 frames per second. I found the battery life on this camera to be pretty good, and so it never felt like 30 was the right choice there. And then the other thing that I was going to mention, that there is a way to, I think it's in the next menu, yeah. There is a way to log your locations in this camera by transferring them from your phone. I've done it a couple of times, but it's honestly more of a headache than a help for me, so that's not something that I do very often, but, oh. The cat's food just came out. But that's, yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I think the execution in this camera isn't so great. So that is, I think, pretty much everything in terms of the settings. If you have any questions, or if you feel like I missed something, or you want me to dig deeper on something, just let me know. But that is pretty much how I use this camera and how I use most of my cameras. I think the ones that would be the biggest difference would probably be like how I use a film camera and how I use my professional camera. But for fun, so like this camera, the XF10 and the X Pro 3, all pretty similar. Like I put them on aperture priority. I use face eye auto detect whenever I can. And that's like the core of that setup, and everything else I guess is kind of modular, but that is what I found to be the most successful for kind of, I wouldn't say point and shoot, but typically when I'm taking photos, I am moving a little bit faster. I don't really like to linger in one spot too long, especially when we're traveling. So this seems to work pretty well for that. But yeah, if you have any specific questions about the GX85, just let me know. But that is it for this one. The next one hopefully is going to either be a video about how I edit photos from this camera and other cameras, or it might be like a POV. We'll see. But either way, hope you have a good one, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.